I didn't think a single night could change anything. Most days looked exactly the same. I worked part-time at a small bookstore downtown, the kind of place where people wandered in to kill time and left with books they probably wouldn't finish. The coffee machine near the register was older than I was. It hissed constantly. The floorboards creaked. The clock above the fiction section always ran 3 minutes slow. I liked it that way. Predictable. The bookstore sat across the street from a laundromat, and every Tuesday evening after my shift ended, I would carry a bag of clothes over there and wait. That was where I usually saw her. Not at first. At first she was just Ethan's mom. The woman who occasionally picked him up when his car was in the shop. The woman who waved politely whenever I happened to be standing nearby. The woman whose name I barely remembered. Claire. 46, I later learned. At the time she was just Claire. The first real conversation happened because of a missing sock. I was sitting by the laundromat window scrolling through my phone without actually reading anything. An unfinished text sat open on my screen. It had been there for 3 days. Not because it mattered. Because I couldn't decide if sending it mattered. There's a difference. You're staring at that thing like it owes you money. I looked up. Claire was standing beside one of the folding tables. I laughed. Maybe it does. She smiled. Bad news. Nothing that dramatic. Those are usually the worst kind. I remember that. Not because it was clever. Because she said it like she understood something she hadn't been told. I watched her fold towels while we talked. Small conversation. Nothing important. The weather. Books. How every washing machine seemed determined to eat one sock per load. Ordinary things. But there was something easy about it. No performance. No trying to impress anyone. When she laughed, she tilted her head slightly downward first, almost like she was surprised by her own amusement. I caught myself noticing that. Then noticing that I was noticing it. Which felt dangerous for reasons I couldn't explain. The following week, she remembered my coffee order. That shouldn't have mattered. But it did. I had stopped by Ethan's house to return a video game he'd left in my apartment. Claire answered the door holding 2 paper cups. You still drink coffee with too much cream. I blinked. You remember that? She shrugged. Some people remember birthdays. I laughed. That's kind of weird. A little. There was a pause. Comfortable. Unexpectedly comfortable. My eyes drifted toward her hands wrapped around the coffee cup. Then quickly away. I wasn't supposed to be paying attention to details like that. She was my friend's mother. End of story. Or at least it should have been. The strange thing about loneliness is that nobody sees it happening. It lives inside routines. Inside unopened messages. Inside taking the long way home because nobody's waiting for you anyway. Inside reaching for your phone and putting it back down. Again. And again. Claire never asked questions about that. She just seemed to notice. The way someone notices a chair that's slightly out of place. One evening, weeks later, Ethan canceled plans at the last minute. Something about work. I wasn't surprised. People canceled all the time. I was halfway through another quiet night when my phone buzzed. A text. From a number I didn't immediately recognize. I opened it. Claire. Hey, Ethan said he bailed on you. Sorry about that. Then another message appeared. If you're not doing anything tonight, would you mind helping me move a few boxes from the garage? I stared at the screen. Read it twice. Then a third time. The bookstore clock had stopped ticking hours ago. The apartment felt unusually quiet. And for some reason, my heart had started doing something I didn't entirely trust. I didn't know it then. But that text was the beginning of everything. I almost said no. Not because moving boxes sounded difficult. Because saying yes felt strangely important. That should have been my first warning. When I arrived at Claire's house, the garage door was already open, cardboard boxes were stacked everywhere, old furniture sat covered beneath dusty sheets. She was standing on a ladder, trying to reach something from a high shelf. That seems unsafe, I said. She glanced down. There he is, my unpaid labor. I knew there was a catch. You're getting pizza. That doesn't sound legal. It barely is. I laughed. The easy kind. The kind that sneaks up on you. For the next hour, we carried boxes into a storage room at the back of the house. Most of them were heavier than they looked. A few contained photo albums, Christmas decorations, old school projects, the leftovers of a life that had happened slowly. At one point, Claire sat on an overturned box and rubbed her shoulder. Everything okay? Just getting old. I rolled my eyes. You're not old. She looked at me for a second. Long enough that I suddenly became aware of how quiet the garage was. Then she smiled. You're 24, your opinion doesn't count. The conversation drifted after that. Not deeper exactly. Just more honest. The way conversations become when nobody is trying very hard. We ordered takeout and sat at a folding table near the garage entrance. Outside, the sky was turning orange. The neighborhood was settling into evening. A lawnmower hummed somewhere in the distance. Claire stirred her tea absent-mindedly. You know, she said, when Ethan was little, he used to think I knew everything. I smiled. What happened? He became a teenager. That'll do it. She laughed softly. Then her expression shifted. Not sad. Just thoughtful. I miss that version of life sometimes. I waited. She looked down at her cup. When you're younger, everything feels temporary. The bad things, the good things, you think there's always another chapter coming. And now? She took a moment before answering. Now I know chapters end. The words lingered between us. Not heavy. Just true. I found myself wanting to ask more. About her marriage. About the divorce Ethan had mentioned once and never again. About why there were so many unopened boxes tucked away in corners. But some questions feel selfish. So I didn't ask. Instead, I stared at the steam rising from my tea. And thought about how strange this felt. A few weeks ago, she had been someone's mom. A familiar face. Background scenery. Now I noticed everything. The way she tucked loose hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. The way she folded napkins into neat little squares while talking. The way silence never seemed uncomfortable around her. That was the dangerous part. Not attraction. Comfort. Comfort sneaks past defenses. On the drive home, I caught myself imagining things. Random things. Future conversations. More evenings like this. Then I immediately felt guilty. Because Claire wasn't just Claire. She was Ethan's mother. 22 years older than me. A woman with an entire life before I had even graduated elementary school. The math alone should have settled everything. It didn't. A week later, I stopped by to return a toolbox I'd borrowed. She answered the door barefoot, holding a half-finished mug of tea. Oh good, she said, I was starting to think you stole it. I considered it. You don't look criminal enough. That's hurtful. She laughed. The kind that reached her eyes. As I handed her the toolbox, our fingers brushed. Nothing dramatic. Barely a second. Neither of us reacted. At least not visibly. But later that night, lying awake in bed, I remembered that tiny moment with embarrassing clarity. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone had finally looked at me and seen more than who I was supposed to be. After that night, I started noticing how often I checked my phone. Not constantly. Just enough to be aware of it. A message from Claire would appear every few days. Nothing unusual. A picture of a book she thought I'd like. A joke about a washing machine that had apparently eaten another sock. A question about whether I still had her toolbox. Normal things. The problem was that they stopped feeling normal. I would read her messages twice. Sometimes 3 times. Then spend 10 minutes deciding how casual my response should sound. Which was ridiculous. I knew it was ridiculous. That didn't help. A few weeks later, Ethan and I grabbed lunch. Halfway through a conversation about work, he glanced down at my phone when it lit up on the table. Claire's name flashed across the screen. Just for a second. But it was enough. Ethan smirked. My mom texts you more than she texts me. I nearly choked on my drink. What? I'm serious. He laughed. Honestly, I think she likes you better. I forced a smile. A joke. Clearly a joke. Still, something about hearing it out loud made my stomach tight. For the rest of lunch, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Not because Ethan suspected anything. There wasn't anything to suspect. But because I'd started carrying around thoughts I didn't know where to put. Thoughts that felt harmless right up until someone else walked near them. After that, I pulled back a little. Not intentionally. At least that's what I told myself. I took longer to answer messages. Declined an invitation to help her hang shelves. Made excuses. Work. Being tired. Whatever came to mind first. Claire seemed to notice. She didn't mention it. That somehow made it worse. One evening she sent a simple text. Haven't seen you in a while. Everything okay? I stared at it for several minutes. Then typed. Deleted. Typed again. Eventually I settled on. Yeah, just busy lately. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally. Okay. That was all. Okay. For some reason, that single word followed me around for days. The following Saturday, I found myself standing outside her front door anyway. No plan. No reason. I had borrowed a novel months ago and technically needed to return it. Technically. When Claire opened the door, surprise flashed across her face. Then relief. So quick I almost missed it. Hey. Hey. She stepped aside. You coming in? The house felt unusually quiet. Ethan out. Weekend trip. I nodded. Then immediately wished I hadn't asked. We sat in the kitchen. Tea between us. Rain tapping softly against the windows. Neither of us seemed particularly interested in drinking. The conversation wandered. Books. Work. Nothing important. Everything important. At one point, Claire folded and unfolded the tea bag wrapper between her fingers. Again. And again. A tiny nervous habit I'd never seen before. You've been avoiding me. She said it gently. Not accusing. Just honest. I looked down. Maybe. Why? I opened my mouth. Closed it. Because I didn't have a safe answer. Because every truthful answer felt dangerous. The silence stretched. Not uncomfortable. Just exposed. Claire looked at me for a long moment. Then lowered her eyes. Almost as if she regretted asking. Or already knew. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere in the distance. Quiet. Far away. I don't want to make things complicated, I said finally. The words came out smaller than I intended. Claire's expression shifted. Something soft. Something tired. I know. Neither of us moved. Neither of us looked away. For a second, maybe two, the space between us felt strangely fragile. Like something was balancing there. One honest sentence. One step closer. One mistake. My eyes flicked toward her. Then her lips. Then back again. And judging by the way her breath caught slightly, I wasn't the only one. Then the kettle clicked loudly from the stove. Both of us looked away at the exact same time. And whatever had almost happened stayed exactly where it was. Unspoken. Waiting. After the afternoon in her kitchen, something changed. Not outwardly. We still texted. Still talked. Still found reasons to cross paths. But both of us seemed more careful. Like people walking across a frozen lake after hearing the first crack. Neither of us mentioned what had almost happened. That was the strange part. Ignoring it somehow made it bigger. A week later, Claire invited me to help her at a local charity book sale. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Two people who spent most of their conversations talking about books, pretending they weren't talking about anything else. The event lasted most of the afternoon. By sunset, we were carrying leftover boxes toward a small park behind the community center. The crowd had mostly disappeared. The air felt cooler than it had that morning. We ended up sitting on a weathered bench overlooking a walking trail. For a while, neither of us spoke. People think silence means nothing is happening. Sometimes it's where everything happens. Claire was turning a bottle cap between her fingers. Over and over. A nervous habit. I'd started recognizing those. The trail lights flickered on one by one. A jogger passed. Then another. Life continuing around us. Ordinary. Meanwhile, my chest felt like it was carrying something too heavy. Then a man approached from the opposite side of the trail. Probably around Claire's age. Maybe older. He waved when he saw her. Claire. Her face brightened politely. Mark. They exchanged a brief conversation. Apparently they'd volunteered together before. Nothing unusual. Nothing remotely inappropriate. Still, I hated how relieved I felt when he finally left. The realization hit immediately afterward. Sharp. Embarrassing. Because jealousy requires ownership. And I had none. Claire noticed something. Maybe my expression. Maybe the way I suddenly looked away. You're quiet. I laughed once. No kidding. She waited. That was one of her gifts. She knew how to wait. Most people rush to fill silence. Claire let it sit there until the truth got uncomfortable enough to walk out on its own. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. The words surprised me. The moment they left my mouth, I wished I could take them back. But Claire didn't look shocked. Just sad. A little. I think I do. I stared at the trail. At nothing. At everything. You ever want something that doesn't make sense? Her fingers stopped moving. For a second. Then started again. Slowly. Yes. The answer came immediately. Too immediately. The space between us shifted. Not physically. Something quieter. Like two people finally standing in the same room after pretending they weren't. The evening breeze moved a loose strand of hair across her face. She tucked it behind her ear. Then looked at me. Directly. No jokes. No distractions. No escape routes. And suddenly I understood why I'd been pulling away. It wasn't because I didn't feel something. It was because I did. Too much. I swallowed hard. You know this is a bad idea. A faint smile appeared. Not happy. Not amused. Just tired. I know. And Ethan. I know. And the age difference. Her eyes lowered briefly. I know. Every answer removed another place to hide. The silence afterward felt enormous. Claire stared at the ground. Then said something so quietly I almost missed it. Do you think I haven't fought this? My heart stopped. Not literally. Close enough. She wasn't looking at me anymore. Maybe because she couldn't. Maybe because if she did, the conversation would become something else. Something real. The trail behind us had gone nearly empty. The world felt smaller. Just the bench. The cooling air. The distance between us. And the truth sitting there. Uninvited. Impossible to ignore. I turned toward her. She slowly lifted her eyes to meet mine. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us moved away. And hanging there between fear and hope was a question neither of us seemed brave enough to ask. What happens if we stop pretending this isn't happening? The strange thing was, after that conversation on the bench, I thought something would happen. Not immediately. Not dramatically. Just something. A conversation. An acknowledgement. A step. Instead, Claire disappeared. Not literally. But close enough. The text became shorter. Hours turned into days before she replied. Invitations stopped. The easy rhythm we'd somehow built over months vanished so quietly that at first I wondered if I had imagined it. Maybe I had misunderstood everything. Maybe that bench conversation meant more to me than it did to her. Maybe. The mind is creative when it's scared. 2 weeks later, I stopped by the bookstore's cafe before work. The same one I'd been visiting for years. The same corner table. The same coffee. Routine has a way of pretending it's comfort. I was stirring cream into my cup when Ethan slid into the chair across from me. You look terrible. Good morning to you too. I'm serious. I laughed. Weakly. Ethan studied me for a moment. Then looked out the window. My mom's been weird lately. Every muscle in my body tightened. I tried to sound casual. How so? He shrugged. She's been talking about moving. The spoon stopped moving in my hand. What? Nothing definite. He stared out the glass. Just mentioned maybe needing a fresh start. Fresh start. The words hit harder than they should have. Or maybe exactly as hard as they should have. I didn't ask any more questions. I couldn't. The rest of the day passed in fragments. Customers. Books. Conversations I barely remembered having. That night I sat in my apartment staring at my phone. Claire's contact sat near the top of my messages. The last text was 6 days old. A joke neither of us had finished. I opened the conversation. Closed it. Opened it again. Eventually I typed. Are you okay? Simple. Safe. Reasonable. Then I deleted it. The next Saturday I saw her by accident. Or maybe not by accident. Maybe some part of me had hoped. The farmer's market downtown was crowded. People everywhere. Families. Dogs. Street musicians. I spotted Claire near a flower stand. For a moment relief rushed through me. Then I saw the man beside her. Mark. The volunteer from the trail. They weren't holding hands. Weren't standing particularly close. Nothing about the interaction seemed romantic. Still, the sight knocked the air out of me. Not because of what was happening. Because of what wasn't. She looked happy. Comfortable. Like someone slowly rebuilding a life. And I realized I had quietly started imagining I belonged somewhere inside that process. A dangerous assumption. Then Claire saw me. The smile on her face faltered. Just slightly. Mark followed her gaze. I lifted a hand. A small wave. Claire waved back. Nothing more. Nobody crossed the distance. Nobody explained anything. The crowd carried all three of us in different directions. Later that evening my phone buzzed. A message from Claire. I stared at it for almost a minute before opening it. I owe you an explanation. My heart jumped. Then sank. The message continued. I've been trying to figure some things out. Things I should have figured out before. I'm sorry. That was it. No explanation. No clarity. Just another door left half open. Half closed. A week later I learned the rest. Not from Claire. From Ethan. My father called her recently. The words came out casually. His father. Claire's ex-husband. The man she'd spent years trying to move beyond. Apparently he wanted to reconnect. Maybe repair things. Maybe not. Nobody knew. Not even Ethan. Suddenly her distance made sense. And somehow it hurt more. Because now there was a reason. A real one. A history that existed long before me. A life already filled with unfinished chapters. That night I sat alone in my apartment with a message drafted on my screen. Not angry. Not desperate. Just honest. I miss talking to you. My thumb hovered above send. For a long time. Then stopped. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. And the message stayed exactly where it was. Unsent. 3 days after I learned about Claire's ex-husband, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. Not because I was busy. Because hope can be exhausting. The screen showed her name. Claire. I stared at it until the last second. Then picked up. Hello. Silence. Not empty silence. The kind people need when they're deciding whether to be honest. Finally. Can you come over? My chest tightened. Yeah. Okay. That was all. No explanation. No details. Just an address I already knew. 20 minutes later, I was standing on her front porch. The same porch where she'd handed me coffee months ago. The same door I'd walked through a dozen times. Everything looked familiar. Nothing felt familiar. Claire opened the door before I knocked. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she stepped aside. Come in. The house was quiet. No television. No music. Just the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Claire led me inside and sat at the table. A mug of tea rested untouched in front of her. Another sat across from it. Waiting. I sat down. The tea had already gone cold. For a while neither of us touched it. I saw him. The words caught me off guard. My ex-husband. I nodded. I figured. Claire laughed softly. Without humor. Of course you did. Her fingers wrapped around the mug. Then let go. Then wrapped around it again. I thought maybe I owed it to myself to see if there was anything left. I looked down. Not because I was angry. Because I already knew where this conversation could go. And I wasn't sure I wanted to hear it. Claire noticed. She always noticed. There wasn't. The room became very still. Outside, a car drove past. Then another. Life continuing. As usual. Claire stared into her tea. I spent weeks trying to convince myself that this was about age. I said nothing. I told myself it was about Ethan. Still nothing. I told myself it was because people would judge it. Her voice grew quieter. But the truth is. She stopped. Looked away. Started again. The truth is I was scared. The words landed gently. Which somehow made them heavier. I spent so much of my life being responsible. A faint smile appeared. Telling myself what made sense. I watched her fold the edge of a napkin between her fingers. Again. And again. A familiar nervous habit. Then she looked at me. Directly. No walls left. No excuses. I didn't pull away because I didn't feel something. My heart pounded once. Hard. I pulled away because I did. Neither of us moved. The kitchen suddenly felt very small. Just two people sitting across from each other. Finally saying things out loud. The dangerous things. The honest things. I swallowed. Then laughed quietly. Not because anything was funny. Because relief sometimes sounds like that. I thought I imagined all of it. Claire's eyes softened. No. A long pause. Then another. The kind that used to frighten me. Not anymore. I looked at the cold tea. At the table. At her. And finally said the thing I'd spent months avoiding. I care about you. Simple. Nothing dramatic. No speech. Just the truth. Claire closed her eyes briefly. As if hearing it cost something. Maybe it did. When she opened them again, they looked brighter. Not with tears. With certainty. I know. The words settled between us. Gentle. Steady. Real. Then she reached across the table. Not far. Just enough. Her hand resting lightly over mine. Warm. Human. Nothing more. Nothing less. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Neither of us needed to. Then Claire smiled. Small. Nervous. Honest. And after everything that had happened, after all the silence and distance and fear, I found myself smiling back. Okay, she asked quietly. I squeezed her hand once. Okay. Life didn't change overnight. That would make for a better story. It just isn't what happened. After that evening in Claire's kitchen, things moved slowly. Almost frustratingly slowly. There were conversations that needed to happen. With Ethan. With ourselves. With all the doubts we'd spent months carrying around. The strange thing was that none of those conversations were dramatic. Nobody stormed out. Nobody gave speeches. People were uncomfortable for a while. Then less uncomfortable. Then eventually, normal. Life has a way of adjusting to things once they stop being secrets. Months passed. The seasons changed. The bookstore clock still ran 3 minutes slow. The coffee machine still hissed every morning. I still stopped at the same cafe before work. Only now most mornings I wasn't alone. Claire would meet me there before heading to work. Not every day. Just enough that the empty chair across from me stopped feeling permanent. She still drank tea. I still drank coffee with too much cream. Some habits survive everything. Others quietly disappear. The loneliness was one of those. Not completely. Nobody escapes loneliness forever. But it no longer lived in every corner of my routine. It no longer followed me home. One Saturday afternoon, nearly a year after that first text about moving boxes, Claire and I found ourselves back at the same park. The same trail. The same weathered bench. The one where everything had almost fallen apart. And almost come together. We sat in comfortable silence, a skill we'd accidentally perfected. People passed by. Dogs barked somewhere in the distance. Leaves drifted across the path. Ordinary things. The kind that become important when you're paying attention. Claire nudged my shoulder lightly. You know something. What? You still overthink everything. I laughed. That's a serious accusation. It really isn't. She smiled into her tea. The smile still did that thing to me. Not the dramatic heart-racing thing people write songs about. Something quieter. More reliable. Like coming home and finding a light left on. I looked at her. Really looked. At the woman who had once been Ethan's mom before she became Claire. The woman who remembered my coffee order. The woman who folded napkins when she was nervous. The woman who taught me that being seen and being known weren't the same thing. And somehow, somewhere along the way, we had stopped feeling impossible. Not because the challenges disappeared. Because we stopped measuring ourselves against them. The truth was simple. Life wasn't perfect. We still disagreed about stupid things. She still worried too much. I still hesitated before sending texts. The future still came with question marks. But it felt like our future. That was enough. As the sun started sinking lower, Claire handed me her tea and stood to stretch. I held the cup automatically. The same way I had 100 times before. The same way I probably would 100 times after. She looked down at me. You know, she said, that first night I almost didn't send that message. The garage one. She nodded. I smiled. I almost didn't come. Claire laughed softly. The familiar kind. The one that tilted her head downward first. For a moment, neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. Some stories end with declarations. Ours ended with understanding. The kind that arrives slowly. The kind you earn. As we walked back toward the parking lot together, Claire slipped her hand into mine. Natural. Unremarkable. Home. And sometimes I still think about that unfinished text I used to stare at in the laundromat years ago. The one I never sent. Funny. Life finished that sentence anyway. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?
Make sure to like this video, share and follow for more, and subscribe to my channel. Subscribe to my